but I will begin with value chains because these are the main aspect of the globalization of our food systems, which the point is that we have seen various times today, the value chains of the food system are increasingly longer and complex. This was the case before for some commodities like which were inherited from the colonial times, like cocoa or tea or cotton or other crops, let's say. But now it's much more. It's different because the process itself, as just shown Gilles, is globalized. This is the case for soy, which has become totally necessary to produce poultry or egg or even dairy products. It's also the case. So the soybean has become an input in the agricultural process, but also in food transformation process. This is the case for oil palm, for instance, which is produced in Southeast Asia, and which enters as a necessary component now in a lot of food processed food, like cookies here, or even in other kind of necessary products for us, for just like detergents or cosmetics. So we have these very complex value chains all around the world. We have seen various pictures already various times today. Here it's the case for soybeans. You have in blue the soybeans, in yellow the soybean oil, and in pink the meal. So they are also complex with the byproducts you can have on the markets. And another way of showing this complexity of the value chains is this case is the value chain of soybean between Brazil and China. I found it on a Rabobank website. Rabobank is an agribusiness bank. They show you how there are different types of input companies, both at national and international level, farmers, corporate farmers, different types of traders, crushers, cooperatives, some part who go on the domestic markets, other on exports. Exports can be meal or cake or soybeans or oil, and they can go to different types of markets in the target countries. So it's another illustration of this complexity. We could have seen it for oil palm. I have no time, so I will switch this. But there are very different also types of representation of these value chains. So certainly, as these value chains and their complexity show, food systems are shaped by actors and economic actors' decisions, but they are also shaped by policies. And this is what I will try to illustrate today. And these policies are connected to, they influence all these stages of the food systems. They can be transport policies, they can be agricultural policies, of course, it can be industrial policies, trade policies, sanitary regulation, waste policies. All kinds of policies can be connected to the food system. And the question that we raise is, how are these policies, and when you have policies, you have also politics, how are they connected, and how do they explain and shape this globalization of the food system? Just very quickly, to give you an idea of the type of glasses I put on my eyes when, as a political scientist, when I look at food system, I will give you some analytical insights. My work is inscribed itself in what we call the cognitive policy analysis, which I look at policy and analyze policy with trying to look at what kind of ideas or visions or representations or beliefs they embed, and how they promote some ways of looking at the reality. And to do this, I will distinguish between arenas, which are the scene where policies are bargained and decided, and forums, which are scenes where policies are discussed, where alternatives, different options are compared, and on which you can have broader discussions about how how we see the policy problems, and how we could imagine solutions to try to resolve these problems. So in the time you can have various forums, for instance scientific specialized forums, specialized around disciplines, or specialized about issues which are discussing things related to policy problems, and at the end on the arena, on the political arena, you have perhaps one or two options which are discussed, and one of my jobs is try to understand how the number of alternatives are progressively reduced towards the final decision. So what counts in this? There are many rules which, for instance, who is on the arena, who is allowed to be there or not allowed, what are the rules of the game for deciding, but also for arguing. If you are on a scientific forum, you will have to, we know the rules, we have to be, to say the truth, to demonstrate what we do. It will be different on a political party arena, for instance, or forum on which you don't have to say the truth, you just have to try to find ways to have the adhesion of the most people possible, the more people possible. So depending on the communities on which you have to express yourself, you will have a rule of the game for arguing which will be different. And of course you have culture, etc. Another very important point, and I think it has been very clear today in various discussions, is the role of metrics, what the STS scientists, sociological and technical studies science, call infrastructure of knowledge. They are very important because depending on the type of metrics you use, you will discuss about different things. For instance, if you talk about GDP or happiness index to talk about the wealth or the wealth of the country, it will be very different. If you talk about, I don't know, yield gap closure, for instance, or cumulative yields with a mixed crop system, you will talk about different things also. So the metrics are very important, and the metrics are a stake of political decision in a way. And in all this, what is also very important is the type of resources the different actors may have to be able to defend their position in the discussion. And these resources can be of different kinds. They can be financial, human, cognitive, institutional control. There are many resources, and these resources are really inequitably distributed among the different actors of the food system. Okay, and so based on these, let's say, theoretical inputs, the question I raised about what are the concrete processes behind the globalization of food system, who are the main institutions, which are the discourses, and what are the power relations behind this organization of the food system. And I think we can characterize the current food systems with these three dimensions. First, a very specific technological package, which is a green, let's say, chemistry-based agriculture, which allows for specialization and upsizing of farms. All this is also about what the STS scientists also call the technological promise. It's about marketization, so encouraging trade and export, as it has been very clearly shown in the previous presentations. And together with marketization, in order to market and increase trade, you have to standardize the product. So standardization is also a very important trait in this kind of policy or referential, which is defining the current food system. And it's also connected to policy liberalization. The idea has been for some decades to increase the states to present on the markets and to free the markets from these distorting or so-called distorting state interventions. And what is allowed is more what we can call market-friendly policies. So in the liberalism, neoliberalism, let's say, the idea is not to take off the state of the functioning of the market, but to make the state easing the functioning of the market, which is a bit different from political science point of view. And this vision of what is a good functioning of the agricultural world, let's say, and the food system itself, is pushed by two big main categories of actors. And the global governance of food system is firstly operationalized, let's say, by international organizations, who are the official, let's say, policymakers. And when we talk about international public policy making, we can schematize one international organization as being an international organization. It can have very different forms, but it's always different states and some administrative elites. And they form a set, an ensemble, in which you have some specific power relations. And for instance, you will have, if you look at the FAO, it's very much dominated by exporting countries like the USA, the Kane Group, Argentina, New Zealand, etc. And traditionally, they fight among themselves to promote some vision of what is a good agricultural policy compared to another. So you have power relation within international organization, within different types of administrative elites, and among states, but also, yes, the other point which characterizes international organization is that you have no election, which is not the case, for instance, at the national level. You have let's say, a weak influence of professional forums. Again, this scheme is extracted from a comparison between the national and the international governance, but well, let's go this way. You have also a little influence of international NGOs, and you have some influence of academic forums. This has been, I have studied this in many different case studies, but I have no time to detail. But let's say that you have a say by a lot of the work done by international organizations may be legitimated through scientific expertise. And so this is how one organization works, with power relation within the organization, but also among international organizations. You have different organizations, international organizations, which make the global governance, and they have among themselves power relation, and they do not all have the same influence on the international debates. And what is the result of all this, in the case of the food system, is that we can see a structurally dominant position of not specialized on agriculture organization, of economic and finance organization. These organizations are, for instance, the World Bank or the IMF, who have the power to constrain the states. And for instance, for loans, they can say to the states, if you want the loan, you have to implement this model or this model of economy. You have also the WTO. The WTO is the organization which sets the rule for international trade, and this is the only organization, international organization, which has the power to constrain all the states. The rules are binding for all countries. This is so they are able, for some of them, to have formal constraint, legally binding constraints on countries and on other organizations, of course. and they are also, it's another kind of power, it's a softer power, but they are also the major diffusers of policy ideas. And this is the case, for instance, again for the World Bank, which is considered as the main think tank for developing countries, or the OECD for our countries. And this dominant position can be partially explained by the legitimacy which has been elaborated and built thanks to the tight links with the economists and in particular scientific economists. This has been studied by many political scientists, by the way. And the concomitant process of this is this idea of standardization I was mentioning before. And all these organizations are tightly promoting the model I was mentioning before. And on the side of the let's say the sectoral approach, you have a certain number of dedicated organizations to agriculture. But what I have explored and seen is that they have a very big difficulty to have their autonomous vision of what they are doing, or they are also very convinced by the dominant model of agro-industry and technological vision of agriculture. So these organizations, they are of course the FAO, which has, for instance, the power to produce international rules through the Codex Alimentarius, which is a kind of mixed organization with the WHO and the FAO. You have the World Food Programme, you have the International Fund for Agricultural Development, or another organization which is specialized, which is the one for health of animals. And so these, let's say that they have not a high profile internationally. And the agricultural advices which are taken by countries are the ones of the previous one I was presenting. There are some innovations, interesting innovations. Recently, for instance, in 2009, we have had the reform of the Committee for Food Security, for World Food Security, the CFS, which has been considered as a kind of very big innovation in the broad landscape of international organization, because for the first time in an international organization, in the United Nations landscape, you have a committee with states, so intergovernmental, plus civil society and private sector inside officially discussing the same arena, which was absolutely, which never exists. And now it has been promoted and implemented in the case of food at the CFS, and this has given for the first time a very important tribune, notably for the civil society, which has been able to express the needs and the claims of peasants, small peasants, social movements, etc., which was considered as a path forward. But as we will see, when important decisions must be taken, they are taken elsewhere. But and we have so mainly so for instance the CFS and the FAO have been recognizing very recently an alternative concept like agroecology. So this is now institutionalized, which was absolutely not the case some years ago. So there is some hopes that alternative models can be institutionalized and considered as politically important, but it remains very marginal. And if you look at what the FAO really advocates for, it's a very big tech oriented vision of what should be innovation and what should be the future of agriculture. So even, let's say, that the landscape of international organizations are very much oriented at market promotion and technological innovations. So you have a kind of, you have this, this is a summary of what I've been saying. You have some kind of international organization dominating others and producing this referential, which is dominating the food system with marketization, standardization, liberalization, productivism, and this belief in a technological premise. So this is one part of the global governance. And the other part of the global governance, which is directly related to this one, is made by firms. And the firms are very important actors in this landscape. And they are very important because they are very powerful, and they are powerful why? First of all, because they are very rich and have a lot of financial resources to defend their positions. And this is notably due to the fact that they have recently concentrated very much. So when you're very concentrated, you have a big economic power and also political weight, which is proportionate. And if you look at the first round, it shows you, it's a very recent research by ETC Group, which has been making this research for 10 or 20 years, and each 10 years they update their data. And we saw that the top 4 agrochemical firms control 62% of the market for agrochemicals. You have 4 firms, Syngenta, Bayer, BASF, and Corteva, which control half of the world commercial markets and 62% for seeds and 62% for pesticides. So it illustrates the level of concentration and of economic and political power of these firms. And this is for the upstream part of agriculture. If you look at the downstream part of agriculture, we always talk about the squared ABCD. ABCD is ADM, Bunch, Cargill, and LDC, who control the main part of the trade of cereals, trade of commodities, agricultural commodities at the world level. And here they give you how the wealth has exploded in the last years. Another way of showing the power of those firms is more vertical. If you take, for instance, in this case, it's the repartition of the value and the costs for the cocoa. I think it's cocoa or coffee. I don't remember. It's dark chocolate, so it's cocoa. And you see, for instance, that for farmers, their cost is almost exactly the same as the value. The cost is here and the value is here, 1.04 and 1.05. So that means that they earn in this value chain, they earn 0.01 euro per kilo of cocoa, versus the repartition of the cost and the value for the other types of economic actors in the value chain. So it gives you an idea of the proportion among these economic operators. And if you remember the picture I showed with international organization, I had just forgotten one point is the role of firms here. And the role of firms is to influence all types of discussions among states, among scientists, among also, I should have put an arrow towards international NGO. They have a lot of what we call there is a name for this, false NGO paid by firms, AstroTurf, we say in sociology. So there is a role of these firms in transforming international public policy. And for this, they have various strategies. They develop what we call political work, and this political work is multidimensional. It's all, of course, lobbying work, for instance, lobbying to try to push for policies which are favorable to their market power, or to restrain or to break on policies which would go against their interest. And sometimes, for instance, in this case, in 2009, there was this convention on prior informed consent on procedure for certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides in international trade. It's a convention which has been reinforcing the kind of code of conducts and regulation that was already existing, notably at the FAO. But this one is an autonomous convention, which has been actually allowed because the agrochemical lobby was okay with it, due to kind of competition among different types of provider of inputs, and you had generic pesticide makers and more research-based multinationals, the one we were mentioning before, and there was a kind of competition for the share of the market, and the R&D-based companies thought that such a procedure, which was supposed to force the countries to exchange information, notably about these pesticides which are banned on northern markets and still sold on southern market. There was this scandal pushed also by NGO, and at the beginning the chemicals firms were resisting a lot, and finally they understood that it would be an opportunity for them to denounce bad pesticides and to have their pesticides more recognized, so they authorized and they released their pressure against this regulation. So you have this kind of play of firms resisting or allowing regulation to take place, for instance. You have also a lot of philanthropies pushed and financed by private firms, which can be very important. This is in the food field. We can mention, for instance, Bill and Melinda Gates or Rockefeller, but in particular, Bill and Melinda Gates have invested a lot in agro-food systems with a special focus on Africa, because Bill is really in love with Africa, and they have founded, for instance, this movement which is called AGRA, which was called before the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. So it's very clear the type of package they sell or they promote or they even subsidize on the ground. It's now greenwashed a little bit, calling sustainably growing Africa's food systems. But so they really develop programs or policies on the ground in Africa in particular, which take place which takes the place of state policies because states have been totally dismantled by liberalization policy. They have no budget anymore, no human resources to implement policies, and no extension services. So these projects promoted by, for instance, by Bill and Melinda are virtually replacing state interventions. So they're making public policy and extension policy. They also directly subsidize international organization. It's the case, Bill Gates is the second funder of the WHO. So they have a political weight inside the organizations themselves. Another type of strategy is the fact of building themselves forums for policies. The typical example is the FFA. The FFA is a Forum for the Future of Agriculture, on which Syngenta and the land urban landowner organization invite annually all ministers, commissioners at the EU level, and they really organize discussion on the future of the CAP, on the future of international trade agreements, on the future of Europe, agro-food system, and they finance everything, and they set the agenda. But all the policymakers go there, because same, you have no more money to organize the set of stuff. They go and they are facilitated by Syngenta, and with no problem. Another example is for instance, the UNFSS. There was a United Nations Food System Summit in 2021, which was directly organized not by the CFS, as I was mentioning before, but the World Economic Forum asked to the United Nations for it, and it was presided by Agra. So it's another way of setting the scene for discussion, a United Nations discussion organized by the private sector in a way. And another thing, well, I will go quick. Another strategy is to influence science. There is a big production about agnotology, the production of minerals by firms through science. I will not go into detail, but there's a very big literature field in STS. Well, it has been proven for asbestos, tobacco, and now more and more works show it for pesticides. You have also the strategy of creating new policy referential. It's the case of the bioeconomy referential, which has been organized by the European Lobby for Biotechnology, and which is now the main referential for Horizon 2020. It's the research policy at the EU level, and now it has become also part of agricultural policy in Europe. And you have also private policy making. You have the case here, I've been studying this very in detail. RSPO, it's a form of greenwash, but it's the idea of the private actors with the NGO setting a green standard for their commodity. So it was first made for notably for palm oil and soy, but you have now the same kind of greenwashing standard for many. These are only some examples, but there are dozens more of roundtables, sustainability roundtables for commodities, which are exchanged on international markets. They have an alliance, which is called ICIL, which is a maker of standards for sustainability standards. So, and they are a way to make private policy public, because you found them as reintegrated in the public action through, for instance, this directive at the EU level, which consider RSPO or RTRS, for instance, as criteria for being accepted as sustainable biodiesel on the European market. But it has been all set by the private sector with their rules, and they have also a say at the UN level with the UNFSS. Well, I'm not going to detail. So in conclusion, global politics, well, this is a summary of what I said, and perhaps I switch to the questions. And the thing I think are important for us to keep in mind when thinking about interdisciplinary research, it's not taking for granted political discourse or political built concepts. For instance, the fact we need to produce more to feed the world, or the fact that smallholders cannot feed the world. Actually, they do feed the world. They're part of the world, that we will not feed them. Critically putting promises into question through interdisciplinary work. I think it's very important. For instance, I have colleagues in CIRAD who are considering it's very new to try to reduce pesticide use in Africa. But we have tried for, I think it's 40 years now, we try to do this. In France, it doesn't work. How can we do this when markets for pesticides are exploding in Africa?